My name is Jin Park, and I haven't had a meaningful conversation with another human being in 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not since my grandmother's funeral, when my cousin Sarah held my hand during the service and whispered, "At least we still have each other." But Sarah lives in Seoul now, working for Samsung, and our time zone differences mean that by the time I'm ready to talk about my day, she's already asleep in tomorrow. I live in New York City, surrounded by 8 million people. Yet I might as well be stranded on a desert island for all the human connection I experience. I moved to Manhattan 3 years ago after graduating from Cornell with a degree in data science, drawn by the promise of opportunity and the anonymity that a big city could provide. Growing up in the suburbs of Albany, I had always felt like an outsider. Too Korean for my white classmates, too American for the few Korean families in our area. My parents, who immigrated when I was 5, had built a life focused entirely on work and my education, leaving little room for social connections or community building. They spoke Korean at home, but insisted I respond in English to improve my language skills. The result was that I became fluent in both languages, but truly comfortable in neither. The isolation began gradually, so subtly that I didn't recognize it as a problem until it had already consumed my life. In college, I had convinced myself that I was just focused on my studies, that social connections were a distraction from my academic goals. I spent most of my time in the library or computer lab, emerging only for classes and meals that I ate quickly and alone. My dorm mates invited me to parties and study groups during freshman year, but my shyness and culture anxiety made these interactions so uncomfortable that eventually the invitation stopped coming. When I landed a job at Dataflow Analytics in Midtown Manhattan, I thought the professional environment would provide natural opportunities for connection. My colleagues were friendly enough during business hours, discussing project deadlines and technical specifications with a casual efficiency that characterizes most office interactions. But when 5 o'clock arrived, they would disperse to lives I could only imagine. Drinks with friends, dinner dates, family obligations, gym classes, hobby groups. I would return to my studio apartment in Queens, eat takeout while watching Netflix, and tell myself that this was temporary, that once I got settled in the city, I would start building a social life. The apartment itself became both my refuge and my prison. It was a tiny space on the 4th floor of a building where I rarely encountered my neighbors. The walls were thin enough that I could hear fragments of other people's lives. Couples arguing, children laughing, friends gathering for dinner parties. But these sounds only emphasized my own silence. I had furnished the place with the bare minimum: a bed, a desk, a small table with one chair. Looking back, that single chair was perhaps the most telling detail of my existence. I had unconsciously designed a life for one. My parents called every Sunday, and these conversations became exercises in elaborate fiction. "How was your week, Gene?" my mother would ask in Korean, and I would construct narratives about busy work projects, interesting colleagues, and plans for the weekend that existed only in my imagination. When they asked about friends, I would mention co-workers by name as if we had relationships beyond professional courtesy. I became skilled at turning workplace small talk into evidence of social connection, describing brief conversations about weekend plans as if I had been included in them. The holidays were the worst. During my first Thanksgiving in New York, I realized that I had nowhere to go. My parents had planned to visit my aunt in California, assuming I would make my own plans with friends. When they called to check on me, I told them I was having dinner with some people from work, then spent the day watching other families through my window while eating a sad turkey sandwich from the deli downstairs. Christmas was similarly hollow. I bought myself a small gift and wrapped it just to have something to unwrap on Christmas morning. The digital age made my isolation even more complex and painful. Social media provided a constant stream of evidence that everyone else was living fuller, more connected lives than mine. Facebook showed me college classmates getting married, starting families, traveling with groups of friends to exotic locations. Instagram was an endless parade of dinner parties, weekend trips, and casual gatherings that I observed like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. I developed a habit of liking posts and leaving brief comments, maintaining the illusion of social participation while actually experiencing none of its reality. My work performance began to suffer as the loneliness deepened into something more serious. Data analysis requires intense focus and attention to detail, but I found myself making careless errors and missing important patterns in datasets. During team meetings, I would zone out, lost in my own thoughts while colleagues discussed project timelines and deliverables. My manager, Susan, noticed a decline and suggested that I might benefit from getting out more and finding better work-life balance. Advice that felt like salt in an open wound. The turning point came during a particularly brutal winter, when a major snowstorm shut down the city for 3 days. While most people complained about being trapped indoors with their families or roommates, I experienced a strange relief at having an excuse for my isolation. But as the storm continued and the city remained quiet, I realized that my life during the snowstorm was virtually identical to my life on any other day. I was alone in my apartment, eating delivered food, watching screens, and having no meaningful interaction with other human beings. The storm didn't change my routine because I didn't have a routine that involved other people. On the third day of the storm, something inside me broke. I found myself standing at my window, looking down at the empty street 4 floors below, and wondering what would happen if I simply didn't exist anymore. Would anyone notice? My parents would eventually realize something was wrong when I stopped answering their Sunday calls. But how long would it take? Would my coworkers miss me, or would they just redistribute my assignments and move on? The thought that I could disappear from the world with minimal impact was terrifying and strangely liberating at the same time. I started crying then, deep sobs that seemed to come from a place I hadn't accessed in years. I cried for friendships I'd never formed, for the experiences I'd missed, for the person I might have been if I hadn't allowed fear and cultural anxiety to build walls around my life. I cried for my grandmother, who had died surrounded by family while I sat alone in a hospital waiting room, too overwhelmed by grief to properly connect with the relatives who had gathered to mourn her. I cried for my parents, who had sacrificed so much to give me opportunities in America, never realizing that their son was drowning in the very freedom they had sought. The breakdown lasted for hours, leaving me exhausted but somehow clearer about my situation. I realized that my loneliness wasn't just a temporary phase or a byproduct of being busy with work. It was a pattern I had created and reinforced through years of avoidance, cultural shame, and social anxiety. More importantly, I understood that it wouldn't change unless I actively chose to change it, despite how terrifying and uncomfortable that process might be. The first step was acknowledging the problem to someone other than myself. I found Dr. Lisa Chun, a therapist who specialized in working with Asian American clients struggling with cultural identity and social anxiety. The initial session was mortifying. I had to admit to a stranger that I was 26 years old and essentially friendless, that I spent most of my free time alone, and that I had constructed an elaborate fiction about my social life to avoid disappointing my parents. Dr. Chin listened without judgment, nodding as if my experience was familiar rather than pathetic. Loneliness among young Asian Americans is more common than you might think, she told me during our second session. The pressure to succeed academically and professionally often comes at the expense of social and emotional development. Many of my clients described similar experiences, high achievement paired with profound isolation. She explained that my cultural background created additional barriers to social connection, including family expectations about appropriate relationships, language switching stress, and the exhausting work of constantly translating between cultural contexts. Therapy helped me understand the roots of my isolation, but it didn't immediately solve the practical problem of building actual relationships. Dr. Chin suggested starting small, with structured activities that would provide natural opportunities for interaction without the pressure of forced friendship. I joined a recreational volleyball league for beginners, figuring that sports will require minimal conversation while providing human contact. The first few sessions were awkward and uncomfortable, but gradually I began to recognize familiar faces and engage in brief post-game conversations. One of my volleyball teammates, Marcus, was a graphic designer from Jamaica who had moved to New York around the same time I had. He was naturally outgoing in a way that I envied, but he also seemed to understand the challenges of building community in a new city. After several weeks of casual interactions, he invited me to join him and a few friends for dinner at a Korean barbecue restaurant in Koreatown. "You can help us order," he said with a grin, "and maybe explain what everything is." The dinner was simultaneously wonderful and overwhelming. Marcus's friends were warm and inclusive, asking genuine questions about my work and my background, without making me feel like a cultural exhibit. When they learned that I spoke Korean, they were curious about language differences and cultural practices, but their interest felt respectful rather than fetishizing. For the first time in years, I found myself laughing spontaneously and contributing to conversations without analyzing every word before speaking. That dinner led to other invitations: a birthday party in Brooklyn, a group trip to a museum, casual weekend hangouts that gradually became routine. Marcus became my first real friend in New York, and through him, I connected with a diverse group of transplants who were all navigating the challenges of building adult friendships in an impersonal city. We had different backgrounds and career paths, but we shared the common experience of trying to create meaningful connections in a place that often felt designed to keep people isolated. The transformation wasn't immediate or linear. I still had days when the old patterns of isolation felt easier than the vulnerability required for maintaining friendships. Social anxiety didn't disappear overnight, and I had to learn basic skills that most people develop naturally during adolescence: how to make plans, how to express interest in others' lives, how to be present during conversations instead of constantly monitoring my own performance. Dr. Chin helped me recognize that friendship is a skill that can be learned and practiced, not an innate talent that some people possess and others lack. My relationship with my family also evolved as I became more honest about my experiences. During one of our Sunday calls, I finally told my parents about the loneliness I had been experiencing and the steps I was taking to address it. My mother was initially upset, worried that she and my father had somehow failed me as parents. But my father surprised me with his understanding. "I was lonely too when we first came to America," he admitted. "But I had your mother, and then we had you. I didn't realize how hard it would be for you to build those connections on your own." That conversation opened the door to more honest communication with my parents about the challenges of cultural navigation and identity formation. They began sharing stories about their own struggles with isolation and community building when they first immigrated, experiences they had previously kept private to avoid burdening me with their difficulties. We started having more meaningful conversations about Korean culture, family history, and the ways that immigration affects multiple generations of a family. The professional benefits of addressing my loneliness were unexpected but significant. As I became more comfortable with social interaction, my workplace relationships improved dramatically. I started joining colleagues for lunch, participating more actively in team meetings, and even attending optional company social events. My manager noticed a change in my engagement and communication skills, leading to opportunities for more collaborative projects and eventually a promotion to senior data analyst. I also became involved in the Korean American Professional Association, initially attending their networking events out of professional obligation, but gradually finding genuine community among other second-generation Korean Americans who shared similar experiences of cultural navigation and identity formation. Many of them described their own periods of isolation and the strategies they had developed for building meaningful connections while honoring their cultural backgrounds. The mentorship opportunities that emerged from this involvement became particularly meaningful. I started volunteering with a program that pairs recent college graduates with established professionals in their fields, specifically focusing on helping other Asian American students develop both career skills and social confidence. Many of the young people I work with describe feelings of isolation and cultural disconnection that mirror my own experiences, and I try to help them understand that these challenges are surmountable with intentional effort and appropriate support. My living situation also changed to reflect my new priorities around community and connection. I moved from my isolated studio in Queens to a shared apartment in Brooklyn with 2 roommates I met through Marcus's social circle. Living with other people required adjustments and compromises I had avoided for years, but also provided daily opportunities for casual interaction and mutual support. Coming home to conversations about each other's days, sharing meals, and having people notice when I'm sick or stressed has restored a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced since childhood. The romantic relationship I developed with Sarah, a Korean-American teacher I met through professional association, has been another source of healing and growth. Our shared cultural background provides a foundation of understanding, but we've also had to learn how to navigate the vulnerability and communication required for intimacy. Both of us had experienced periods of isolation and social anxiety, which initially created challenges, but ultimately became a source of mutual empathy and support. The COVID-19 pandemic, which forced widespread social isolation, ironically helped me appreciate how much progress I had made in building connections. While many people struggle with the loneliness of lockdowns and social distancing, I felt more prepared to maintain relationships through digital communication and creative social activities. The friendships I had built were strong enough to survive temporary physical separation, and I was able to offer support to friends who were experiencing isolation for the first time. Looking back on those 3 years of profound loneliness, I can see how the experience shaped my understanding of mental health, community, and the courage required for authentic human connection. The isolation was devastating, but it also taught me to value relationships in ways that I might not have appreciated if connection had come easily. I learned that loneliness isn't just an individual problem. It's often a symptom of broader social and cultural factors that require systemic solutions as well as personal growth. Key resources and solutions that made the difference. The Asian Mental Health Collective provides culturally competent therapy services and support groups specifically for Asian Americans dealing with isolation, depression, and cultural identity issues. Meetup.com and similar platforms offer structured social activities organized around shared interests, providing natural opportunities for connection without the pressure of forced friendship development. Professional and cultural organizations like the Korean American Professional Association create networking opportunities, while also fostering community among people with shared cultural experiences. Recreational sports leagues and hobby groups provide regular, low-pressure social interaction opportunities that can gradually develop into deeper friendships. Volunteer organizations offer meaningful ways to connect with others while contributing to community welfare, creating bonds based on shared values and service. Therapy, particularly with providers who understand cultural and immigration-related challenges, can help address the underlying anxiety and shame that often fuels social isolation. Co-living arrangements and intentional community housing provide built-in social interaction and mutual support systems that can counteract urban isolation. Cultural community centers and religious organizations offer connection points for people seeking to maintain cultural identity while building new relationships in American contexts. Today, when I meet young professionals who describe feelings of isolation and social anxiety, I tell them that loneliness isn't a character flaw or a permanent condition. It's a signal that humans need community and connection to thrive. The cure isn't just positive thinking or waiting for others to reach out. It requires the courage to be vulnerable, the patience to build relationships gradually, and the understanding that authentic connection often requires moving through discomfort rather than avoiding it. Most importantly, it requires recognizing that you deserve friendship, community, and belonging regardless of how long you've been without them. ___________________________________________________________________________________________________________________